How can e-commerce kill a business? Welcome to today's episode of our Steelo podcast. We'll be talking about our journey and experiences with e-commerce. Now, as an introduction, please bear in mind I'm not undermining any e-commerce, because obviously e-commerce is a massively growing sector of the economy. It works for many customers and for many businesses. But our industry is slightly different, and that's probably why we not only failed it, but it actually cost us a lot of money. So the whole idea was to create a platform very similar to Uber, where we would partner up with other fabricators scattered around the UK, and when someone wants to order a steel, let's say in Liverpool, they would go onto our platform. It was called Mr.Beam. Don't mix it up with Mr. Bean. Obviously, it's a play of words. It was Mr.Beam. And if someone from Liverpool, they would go on that platform. They will then go through the very easy to follow steps. Basically, you pick what structure you want and what kind of steel, what sections, the dimensions you could choose, whether it's the internal, external dimensions, and so on. So it was a very straightforward process, and it would then be fulfilled by a local fabricator. So it ticked most, if not all, boxes of a future company, it being online, very modern, and then using the scattered fabricators, which is sort of the model of the shared economy. So connecting buyers with sellers, and then we would just charge a small percentage of the transaction amount. Now it's something that was very exciting to start with. We developed it. It was based on our experience in the steel industry, of all the constraints, of what's holding back, where are the issues, and for us the most daunting task was liaising with customers about very small orders. So if someone needed a single beam, then going through all the email exchange and quoting through our system and so on, just really was so awkward. It was just, you almost wish there was a tool where the customer could just pick whatever they need, and then the details would go straight to the production floor and then delivered to site. And actually, I must admit that was a very sort of strong driver. We wanted to somehow trim off the steps that were previously done in the office. So the traditional process is to receive an inquiry, predominantly by email. Then you open up a new project, you then quote for the project, you create a quote, you then send it to the customer, you then follow up, and then all of that. And then there's the gathering of information of what the sizes, what the exact dimensions are for what the customer needs. And maybe it sounds like a straightforward process, but it was quite daunting, and the amount of steps required was actually overwhelming. So we thought, well, how can we cut out as much as we can, and ideally cut out everything, so that we don't need to do anything our side and the customer can place an order. So that is how Mr.Beam was born, although we did pivot a few times, because initially it was created with other fabrication partners in mind. We then struggled to get other fabricators on board, but then we did have builders merchants interested in it, and even the big ones out there. So we then decided to pivot into redeveloping the software so it's actually made for builders merchants. Where instead of having a fabricator to choose from, you only choose the local branch. And then the local branch would take the payment or take it off the customer's account and then send us a notification that this is a live order, and then we would fulfill and deliver to site. And then it was actually the other way around, where the builders merchants would pay us the fee rather than us taking the full amount. We rolled that out. It worked for a few orders, but it was a bit awkward, and we then found that it didn't really benefit anyone. The financial side of things, the transacting, who owes what to whom, and invoicing and chasing, it was really, really awkward. So we decided to ditch that idea. and we went back to offering it to fabrication partners. The other thing that happened in the same time and definitely influenced our decision was the acquisition of one of our competitors that went into liquidation. And there was one guy who joined us, and he was obsessed about Mr.Beam. And he was so enthusiastic that he basically started working as a business developer for Mr.Beam. And suddenly we had 8 more fabrication partners signing up. So with the builders merchant side of things sort of being stagnant, and suddenly here having 8 new fabricators signing up, we just thought that, wow, this is like the fresh air coming into our system, and this might be the missing part from the past. And indeed, at the beginning, the orders were flying in, and we used to get 5-6 orders a day, which was very nice. And then the wonderful moment of only taking a small percentage of the order and someone else actually doing the work. I remember till this day that feeling. It was wonderful, like an automatic sales process. But then, like with many things, the honeymoon period was coming to an end. Initially, the fabrication partners were signing up because for them it was a way to modernize, to suddenly be seen online, something they could broadcast to their customers as being forward-thinking as well. And therefore they started looking at the profitability. So let's assume someone places an order for even, let's say, £1,000, and the cost of material is, let's say, £500, leaving another £500 as the distributable income. So we, as the service, we charged 5%. Therefore, from the £1,000 order, we would knock off £50. So obviously this came out of the £500 that was left over, so now it's £450 left. Now this might not sound like a lot, but then when you take into account the fact that most steel fabrication companies run on a 10% net margin, that basically meant that they were losing their whole profit margin. So that was a bit of an issue. And on the other hand, they weren't able to increase the prices because the prices were defined centrally. So we were in charge of the pricing. Then we also realized that actually there's a massive disproportion between the pricing up north and on the south coast or the southeast of England. And we were sort of in a slight sort of trap because we were not able to accommodate for the request of our fabrication partners. So up north the prices were too expensive, down south they were too low, not competitive or not profitable. So then that would mean we would have to further develop the software, allowing for the difference in prices across the country and so on, and we just said no, we can't go down that route because we'll overcomplicate the whole concept. But then also, if you look at our end, we only charged 5%, or in the view of some of our fabrication partners, the 5% was too high, so they wanted us to charge, let's say, 2%. So we end up in a situation where for them the 5% was basically taking out their profits, and for us the 5% was not enough to keep the whole thing running. So going back to our example of £1,000, from that order we would only have £50. And in the IT world, as you can imagine, £50 is just almost nothing. Imagine how many sales you would need to cover the costs of employing a single person to manage the inquiries, let alone the development costs. I mean, we spent a fortune developing the software, and obviously this was we sort of put our bet on this software, but there was no way in the world that the ongoing fee of 5% would cover the running cost of the business the cost of the servers, updating the website, then having some form of marketing, social media platforms, and then the development and so on. So the only way this could work was if we had, let's say, 100 fabrication partners with, let's say, 3 orders each a day. So with 300 orders a day, without us fulfilling it, but only working on the software, then indeed it would work very nicely. And we, as a steel company, we would pivot into being a software company, which was our desire back then. But as you can see, software like this, it's a great idea. The concept is fantastic. The fact that you provide a platform that can be used by anyone in a sort of geographic area, like across the UK, and then having it locally done, so less carbon footprint, and it's just wonderful. But without the numbers, you've got a recipe for disaster, and that is exactly what happened to us. We had to pull the plug on it. It was a very difficult decision, but it's one of those decisions where you just have to cut your losses. It was very tempting to just continue and just hope for the best, but there came the point where you just have to call it a day. But like I said at the very beginning, it doesn't mean that the concept is bad. It's just that you have to go in volume. And firstly, well, like Uber, there's a reason why they have thousands of drivers using their platform, because those are the levels you need to cover the overheads. But secondly, as is widely talked about, these companies aren't necessarily making a profit, and they're actually growing only on the fact that future investors are paying in money to pay back the existing investors. So yeah, the concept's great, but our experiences unfortunately weren't as great. So in this way, e-commerce didn't work for us. And be careful not to spend too much money, especially when it comes to development, because no matter how exciting the concept or the idea, it might be a very costly idea. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe I've managed to save you from misery in the future, and I hope that this helped you. Please remember to sign up to our podcast so you don't miss on other insights from our experiences. Thank you. See you soon.